We acknowledge that we are recording this podcast from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and their ongoing connection to land and waters throughout Australia.
Welcome to Super Simple Chats, Rest's very first podcast. I'm Ange.
And I'm Alex.
And we will be speaking to industry experts about all things super.
Wait, what the hell is contributions as well?
I didn't realise until recently that super is invested. I thought it was like a savings account.
I'm not sure it's helpful to talk about specific numbers, but it's a lot less than $1 million.
This is actually really important to talk about it because I don't want to miss out on those things.
Try to make it understandable and relatable for everyday Aussies.
After all, it's one of the biggest assets you'll ever have.
Now, this wouldn't be a financial podcast if we didn't start by mentioning that the information discussed is general only and doesn't take into account your own financial situation, needs, or objectives. This information and the relevant products are issued by Retail Employees Superannuation Pty Ltd. Before deciding to join or stay, consider the relevant product disclosure statement and target market determination at rest.com.au/PDS and whether it's appropriate for you. While we've endeavoured to ensure the accuracy and reliability of the information provided, there may be inadvertent errors or omissions. So before acting on any advice, we recommend you speak with a financial advisor. It can be really challenging to know just how much super you need to retire. So joining us today are Matt and Sarah from Rest, who are going to be talking to us about planning for retirement and whether it really is true that you need $1 million to retire. So Matt, Sarah, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
We're really excited to get knee deep in that figure and whether it actually is $1 million.
Yeah, so $1 million, that is quite an intimidating figure. If we're, living a bit more in reality maybe, what is an actual number that people should think about saving?
Yeah, I think that $1 million is something people like to talk about because it's a nice sort of clean number, big number, but realistically, it probably won't be that amount. It probably won't be $1 million. So for me, when I was, have this conversation with people, it really comes down to, I suppose, individual needs and wants in retirement. So I think for me is sort of have a think about what you would like to do in retirement and how you're going to help yourself achieve there. So there's some friendly calculators available online that, with most super funds that you can access, and they'll probably give you a good guidance. And look, if you're not getting the answer out of those retirement calculators that you want, and it's not going to get you to Greece on that holiday that you want to do every year, then maybe have a chat with a financial advisor to see it, to help you get along to that retirement balance.
And I guess to Alex's point, if it's not $1 million, then is there a ballpark figure that we should sort of be aiming for, or a recommended number?
Yeah, so look, there's an association. ASFA is the Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia, and every year since 2004, they've actually put together an estimated, what they call a retirement standard. And the way that they do that is they look at what's your expected spending or what's your anticipated spending, work out therefore what your annual income is kind of likely to need to be.
So is that like considering cost of living in that period of time, et cetera?
So it looks at increased costs over time. It looks at what's the most common expenses of people in retirement, because there are some that go away when you stop working. And so it looks at that, and it sort of then extrapolates out to, about what's the income you need, and therefore about how much super do you need to cover that.
Got it.
I'm not sure it's helpful to talk about specific numbers, but it's a lot less than $1 million. It does make some assumptions around that you'll also probably get at least a part pension in retirement as well, depending on your circumstances. And it does make an assumption about house ownership, but I think we might chat about that a bit later.
Amazing. And I mean, look, I would love to retire with $1 million so that I can go and retire in the Greek islands. I just stole your retirement plan, Matt. I know you want to retire in the Greek islands too. But how realistic is it that Aussies do retire on $1 million, and where does that number come from?
Yeah, it's a funny one, and I've had this conversation with so many people out in the workplace, and I think the $1 million myth probably just comes around because it's a nice round juicy number. I think $1 million is something that for a number of years financial advisors have suggested is that goal. It's a nice goal to work towards. But as Sarah just mentioned, realistically, it's actually not that big of a number that you would need to retire with. But at the same time, there are other assumptions around, owning a house outright and not having mortgage repayments. And, if you are a renter as well, obviously it makes it difficult as well. So I think for me, I can't reiterate enough, it really will come down to your individual circumstances. And, what you want to do is if you want to go overseas a lot, make those international trips, you probably need a little bit more money. The conversion rate for most Aussies is not great when you
great right now,
go
is
to
it?
Europe or America or any place like that, right? So yeah, probably have a bit of a think. Earlier is probably best. Look, if you're looking at it closer to retirement, that's fine as well. But with anything to do with super, the earlier you can look at, your balance, some things that may, incline that to a nice juicy balance come retirement, is going to be beneficial for you.
And I think it's important to remember that the value of superannuation is actually really high, even at those lower amounts. The ability to hit retirement and actually do things like potentially pay off all your debt is a real win, even if it doesn't set you up to be able to go to Greece every year.
Sarah, you touched on this briefly before, and I'd love to deep dive a little more into this idea that a lot of superannuation models are based on owning property. But if we're being realistic, the dream of owning property does feel more and more out of reach for a lot of young Aussies like myself. And personally, my parents didn't actually buy their first properties until they were my dad was retired for the first part, and my mum was 60-something, age redacted, sorry, Mum, but older than that median age and not the typical situation. So I guess my question would be, what does this mean for people who don't own property? Do they need a bigger balance to compensate for not paying a mortgage and their retirement income?
Yeah, I think it's a really tricky subject to tackle, to be honest. I don't think there's a silver bullet answer to this either, if I've got to be honest. I reflect on my own personal circumstances. I only bought my first ever property a couple of years ago, and I've been working full time for a long time, same with my wife. So, living in Sydney, it's it's pretty tricky as well. So we're able to get an entry level property. But even still then, I've got another 30 odd years of potentially paying down that mortgage and all the rest of it. So I consider myself fortunate to be even getting into the market. So for people that are renting, when it gets to retirement age, you may have to be honest, more reliant on the government age pension along with your super balance as well. So there's a combination there. More super in there, obviously it's going to be beneficial for you to be able to do the fun things that you'd like to, but there is a bit of a fallback in the government age pension as well. So I don't think it is all doom and gloom, type of thing. If you are, retiring without, a paid off house and, or a small mortgage, anything like that, there are other options. But at the same time, as I said, if you are concerned about that you will be renting come retirement, as I said, have a look at your super as early as possible. Seek financial advice. Having a chat with them would probably be one of the best things you can do to give you a little bit more peace of mind sort of as you get a bit older.
And I just want to take us one step back. So Sarah, you did mention that the AFSL models do have some considerations built into them, and to Alex's point, one of them is property. Can you build on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the retirement standard that ASRA have put together does assume that you own your own house and outright, so you don't have mortgage payments.
Do you think that's going to change given the current climate that we're in with housing?
Yes and no.
Okay.
It's definitely the case that fewer people hitting retirement own their home outright. That's the trend, but it's off a pretty high level. Over time, even if people don't feel that they can access the property market as early as we used to be able to, there are still people buying their first homes over the course of their life.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. So it's not like home ownership has fallen off a cliff, but the demographics are changing around when people reach retirement. some don't own their own home, some still have a mortgage. And I think that actually talks to the value of superannuation, to be able to actually contribute to that period of your life as well.
I might get cancelled for saying this, but at least millennials can breathe easy at night now, knowing that they don't have to own their home. They can have all the avocado.
That's right. Always so much pressure on millennials.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is,
slightly biased.
Okay, so I'm going to speak to a similar point, and Sarah, this is more for you. I guess, and this is probably going to get covered in another episode as well around women in super, but we're talking about people owning their own homes, and typically we're finding that, you know, older women are the ones that are either more homeless or they don't have their own homes. How is this impacting that particular cohort of individuals?
Yeah. I mean, you're right about those statistics in terms of single women over 55 are the fastest growing number of homeless people in Australia, which is devastating. But I think there are ways in which to sort of predict and manage, you know, this over time, so that risk is lower. And that's not to say that, you know, it's anybody's fault that they end up in those circumstances. And so consideration of a woman's superannuation balance is just as important as her spouse's. And so there are options around to actually look at what you can do to even up the superannuation balance over your working life as well.
You know what, like personal anecdote is, like, I was looking at my parents' situation, and Mum took out quite a bit of time to look after us kids when we were growing up. And now I look at the balance between Mum and Dad, and it's like the disparity is huge, and their wages weren't that different, both working class, but you kind of do the comparison of what 6 or 7 years out of the workforce can do to that final amount. And I guess lucky for Mum, they did sell the house, so they were able, like, you know, so Mum's put herself in a good financial situation, but that's not the case, I don't think, for every Australian. So if you don't own your own home and you are in this situation, what are some of the things that you might be able to do?
Yeah, look, leaning on your super to actually do some of this does actually help, because if you haven't got access to that, at least superannuation gives you an asset. So you've got circumstances around things like co-contributions or splitting contributions where you can build up that balance, and also looking at, you know, where you've got broken work patterns during your working life, what can you be looking at to top up your super during those times as well.
I mean, on the flip side of that, my mum was very much a corporate power woman of the 90s and took the least amount of time off, which I love and respect her for. It was a great model for me. But her super balance, she will say, is a lot higher than those of, like, any friend that she has. And it just goes to show, like, there's situations out of your control that you can't really help. You take time off before super's even compulsory, maybe to... Yeah, it's challenging for every different Australian. Everyone has a different story.
We actually took it out and spoke to everyday Aussies about this exact topic to see what they thought about it.
Have you thought about your retirement and what that might look like?
No. I think I'm just not worried about it yet.
Oh, no, I'm too young for that.
No, not really.
Yes.
If I'm working in a job that I really love, then I wouldn't want to retire.
How much do you think you need to retire?
I have no idea.
I do have a number that I'd be comfortable with.
I never planned, like, you know, how much I need by the time I retire.
Probably like $1 million.
Realistically, I don't think that it will be millions. I think it will probably be a lot less.
Are you at all worried about what your retirement might look like and whether you might run out?
I'm not really worried about that, no.
Yes, this is exactly what I'm worried about.
At this point, I try not to think about it.
I am worried. So yeah, a plan would be good.
Back to you, Ange.
So Sarah, this next one's for you. I wanted to ask, what is driving the disparity between men and women in retirement at the moment?
Yeah, it's an interesting problem, isn't it? And there's a whole range of causes around, you know, what we call the gender super gap and the causes that lead to that. Definitely career gaps is a big one, where you've got breaks to work, and the higher part-time and casual work, usually following having a baby. You've also got women take on a higher proportion of generally unpaid work and caring responsibilities. And you've got, on top of all of that, you've got a generalised pay gap across the whole economy. And all of that leads to what's currently about a 28% difference in men's retirement balances compared to women's. So there are changes that are happening around this. We've seen recently the removal of the threshold at which you get paid super by an employer. So it used to be that you didn't have to get super on your salary until you hit a 450 threshold a month. That's gone. Awesome news.
And is that $450 combined or from one employer?
That was from one employer. So if you were earning a lot more across a number of employers, you weren't getting super.
Okay, so if you had like 3 or 4 casual jobs and you were working them all and none of them were quite hitting that threshold, then you might not be getting super on any of those.
Absolutely. So that's been fixed, which is fabulous. I think we'll start seeing some real differences to women's super balances as a result of that.
Great.
What else could women do?
Well, the other thing is, from a government perspective, is we're also in Parliament now, is superannuation going to be paid on the Commonwealth scheme paid parental leave, which is awesome as well. But there are other options that you can do yourself in terms of just thinking about your super before you have those breaks and what can you do to top it up. There are also options around contribution splitting, where you can actually, as a couple, you can divide your superannuation contributions between both of you, and possibly get access to the government co-contribution scheme, where you actually get government contributions for that go on top of your personal ones. So that sort of range of things. And I think a lot of it is actually just keeping it in mind.
Yeah, great.
So we've established that $1 million figure is a bit of a myth, and it's probably more about what you want your retirement to look like. With a sprinkle of a caveat of it could be, you might have a lower balance if you are a woman on average. So that being said, what are some practical steps you could actually take today, say you're in your 20s, to potentially boost your balance if it's not where you think it could be?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few things, but I think what I always suggest to anybody when I speak to them about super for the first time is engage with your super fund. And what do I mean by that? It's super easy in this day and age to engage with your super, in the sense that most funds will have an app. So that is the first thing I'll always say to everybody is download the app of your respective super fund. I know most people have a smartphone, so most people are familiar with apps as well. So if you download the app of your respective super fund, you can see your balance, you can see your contributions from your employer, make sure that they're paying your super, which is obviously important too, and then you can see your balance grow as well. So I think when you do that, it makes it a little bit more real, a little bit more tangible. When I first started working in super, I used to work in a call centre, and people used to have to call through to the call centre to say, hey, Matt, can you give me my balance as of today? And I would read out a script and I would read out their balance, and they would write it down, and then they'd read it back to me, and I said, no, that's wrong. And then we'd read it out again. And then they would go off on their day. And I would have probably 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of those calls a day. So, engaging with your super is probably the best thing you can do. And as I said, downloading the app of your respective fund is probably the first point of call. The other thing to consider, and I think for me, it's a tricky topic in the current climate, because cost of living is not going anywhere in Australia. It's a global issue at the moment. But one thing we generally like to see from people, if they can afford it, is contributing extra to their super. And you can do that through various means. One's called salary sacrifice, where you can sit down with your employer and ask them to forego some of your salary and put it into your super, either a percentage of your salary or a figure amount. But once again, this is only one thing to consider if you can afford. I'm very mindful of how much 2 bags of shopping still costs. I think for me, I won't name the grocery store, but I went to one just last night and got 2 bags of shopping, and it was $90. So,
we're
that's
all feeling that pain, Matt, don't worry.
So that pain is real at the moment. So very conscious of that. But, figures will show and the calculators will show that such a small difference now will make such a big difference over time. And you'll have this friend of ours called compound interest working away in the background. So if you can contribute...
Sounds like a friend I'd like to have.
Oh, yeah, it's a great friend. And, $5-10 a week over 30, 40 years can make such a big difference in your retirement. If you're going to start to look to contribute more to your super, once again, take advantage of the advice that's available to you via your super fund. Advisors are more than happy to run through what an extra $5 or $10 a week will mean in retirement, because they know at the end, based off their calculations, it'll be a lot more than if you didn't. So I think for me, they're probably the two key things, really basic fundamental things. Engage with your super via ideally their app. If they don't have an app, have a look online. Most super funds have an online portal where you can check it, just like your bank account. And then the second thing would be, if you can afford additional contributions, and then the benefits of that too.
One thing I'd like to speak to, or I guess ask the question around, is I guess the differences in what retirement looks like for everybody. So my understanding is that there is an age at which you can retire, but there are different ways with how you can retire. Can you explain this to me in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, so the official what we call the preservation age for super, that's a government mandated age looking at when you can access your superannuation. But what we're seeing now is that people's retirement all looks incredibly different. So the old idea of retiring at 60 or 65 and working full time until you stop is actually really going out the window as a general trend. So people drop down to part time. They look at different jobs. One of the biggest employers of older people in Australia is Bunnings, and these are frequently professionals who retire from their corporate life and go and work at Bunnings 2 days a week. It's an incredible trend. I love it.
I think my dad would like to do that as well.
Yeah.
So it all looks different.
I think as well, it's a good point as well. Come retirement, often, unfortunately, you don't retire with the amount that you'd like to, and you do have to work. But I think in retirement, I've got some ex-colleagues that have now retired, and I think for me, they've always said to me they've got to find that sense of community in retirement, which is really important as well, because I think if you're just doing what's referred to as the 3 Gs, which is gardening, grandkids and golf, which sounds amazing,
I mean,
right?
that sounds really great. Where do I sign up?
It sounds amazing. But I think for me, it's often finding, what else can I do? So if you do have to go back into the workforce and get a 2-day job, a week at Bunnings, I think a lot of people enjoy it. It's not like, that you have to be in the office 5 days a week or, digging holes 5 days a week type thing. You're able to work in a workplace which is fun, vibrant. You've got, some new colleagues, and, with that becomes more of a social network too. So there are obviously some upsides to, going back. I wouldn't say it's the worst thing having to go back and work a couple of days a week.
So actually, just before this episode, Sarah, we were talking about your mum and how retirement looks a little bit different for her as well. Can you tell us a bit more about Mum's story?
Yeah, absolutely. My mum was an academic and a nurse before that, and then an academic in nursing. And she continued working well after 70, but it staged down. So she went from teaching a lot of classes to working with the university on research and then dropping down again to just supervising a couple of students. And really, she only fully retired, I think, when she was 72. So it's absolutely available in lots of different workplaces, that there is this pattern of not fully letting go over the course of the end of your career.
I feel like we've established then, not only have we busted the myth of a perfect round figure, but the idea of a perfect retirement plan, that everyone's looks different.
Yeah, everyone certainly is different. So I think hopefully that gives people listening to this somewhat peace of mind in terms of, not having to reach that big juicy $1 million or even more. I think a lot of people might think you might need more than $1 million, but it's, certainly not the case, and it'll come down to the individual.
Great.
And also the idea that if you can't afford right now to contribute to your super, because that tends to be the one silver bullet answer, that it's okay, that we're all feeling a bit of the crunch at the moment, and maybe instead just start from step one, which is engaging with your super. Yeah,
correct. There's plenty of things you can look at with your super, and most super funds will have so many tools and calculators and things available for you at your disposal. So look, I know it's probably not the first thing people think of when they get home from work is to jump online and have a look at calculators. I mean, that's what I do, right? But look, as I said, look, if you want to help yourself, I'd certainly have a play around with it and speak with your super fund. If you don't want to speak to somebody on the phone, you don't have to. There's so many ways you can do it digitally now as well. There's even things like digital advice services available these days. So, please take advantage of it.
Thank you again to both of you for coming and joining today's episode.
You're welcome. It's been awesome. Thank you.
And Sarah, I'd love to dive in a little bit deeper into that women in super topic. So it'd be great to have you back for another episode. If
Absolutely.
You're keen.
Let's do it.
Amazing. Lock that in, guys. You heard it here first. So please make sure to like, follow and subscribe.
For any more information on the things we spoke about today, there'll be some links in the description below.
And that is
super simple.